number of years ago, I shared with you one of my favorite chapters of Anne Lamott's classic book, Traveling Mercies, a chapter entitled Why I Make Sam Go to Church. On this Sunday that we recommit ourselves to the mission and ministry of Christ Church, as we offer ourselves as stewards and as trustees of all that belongs to God, it seemed fitting to hear her wisdom again. Anne was a single mom living in San Francisco, and Sam, now grown, was then her young son. Anne wrote this: Sam is the only kid he knows who has to go to church. He rarely wants to. This is not exactly true. The truth is he never wants to. What young boy would rather be in church on weekends than hanging out with a friend? It does not help him to be reminded that once he's there, he enjoys himself, and that he gets to spend time drawing in the little room outside the sanctuary, that he only actually has to sit still and listen during the short children's sermon. It does not help that he genuinely cares for the people there. All that matters to him is that he alone among his colleagues is forced to spend Sunday morning in church. You might think, she continues, noting the bitterness, the resignation, that he was being made to sit through a 6-hour Latin Mass. Or you might wonder why I go to all the trouble to make this strapping, exuberant boy come with me. And if you were to ask, this is what I would say: I make him because I can. I outweigh him by nearly 75 pounds. But that is only part of it. The main reason that I want to give is that I want to give him what I have found in the world, which is to say, a path and a little light to see by. Most of the people I know who have what I want, which is to say, purpose, heart, balance, gratitude, joy, are people with a deep sense of spirituality. They are people in community, people who pray, who practice their faith. They follow a brighter light than the glimmer of their own candle. They are part of something beautiful. Could that be at least part of the reason why we choose to be here? Could it be, whether consciously or unconsciously, that we recognize that when the people of God gather to do the work, the celebration of being church, that something profound, something beautiful, something significant, something larger than ourselves is going on? Certainly, being here is not always fun. Sermons can be upsetting or even uninspiring. The morning's music selections may not be our particular cup of tea. Showing up on a Saturday morning to build a habitat house is not exactly pastry and coffee at the Paris bakery. Making the commitment to be present on a Thursday night for choir practice or a Friday evening to cook a meal for the veterans at PATH is not exactly a happy hour next door at the Tuck Room. But could it be that together we recognize that what we are about here is essential not only for our lives, but for the world? The church is where we grow a deep and abiding relationship with Jesus. It is where we learn to think and behave Christianly. It is where we acknowledge in worship both our dependence on and our gratitude toward God. It is where we pass the faith on to the coming generation. It is where we band together to love and care for one another, and then depart to love and care for our world. It is something beautiful. From the earliest gatherings of church followers or Christ followers, the Christian community has devoted itself to 4 common things. How we do these 4 things looks a bit different from church to church, but the reality is that every church, from the very beginning until today, has participated in 4 common behaviors, 4 common commitments that give their life together a particular shape. Those 4 things from the text that Matt read earlier are what make a church a church. Those of the earliest church devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They gathered and studied the scriptures and wrestled with what the texts mean when they showed up at work or school the next morning. They discovered who they were talking about when they spoke the name of God. They learned their purpose on earth. Why? In devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, they got their hearts and minds in line with God's. They learned to think like Christians think and do like Christians do. As well, they devoted themselves to fellowship. They gathered to connect deeply into each other's lives, the sorrows, the burdens, the struggles, the joys. Why? By God's design, the Christian faith is relational rather than simply personal and private. And it is the quality of our loving, our debating, our serving, our celebrating, our meals together that put hands and feet on the teaching we get through our worship and study. 2, they devoted themselves to the breaking of bread. In other words, they gathered regularly for worship in the Lord's Supper. Why? It is in the songs we sing, in the patterns and rituals of our spiritual life, that we are reminded that in both life and in death, we belong to God, a God of beauty and challenge, a God who is present in the person with whom we share the pew, who has sins to be forgiven just as we do. A God whose mercy and grace are real and experienced uniquely in our common worship together. And finally, they devoted themselves to the prayers. They gathered to pray together, to talk things over with God. Why? They knew that strength and wisdom for living was found in relationship and consultation with one wiser and more loving than they could ever be. Christ had told them and tells us that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, there he is. And the earliest Christians knew that prayer, both in private as well as our prayer together, were indispensable for their life. Note how in every sentence of Luke's depiction of what makes our lives matter most, our connections, our life together, our sometimes rocky and sometimes sweet, but always necessary life together. St. Patrick was once asked which was most important, to pray, or to read the Bible, or to gather together. And St. Patrick answered this way: the latter, of course, to gather together, because without it we will stop doing the former. In the earliest church, they learned, they loved, they worshiped, and they prayed. Their Sunday morning practices look a lot like ours, only without heat or air conditioning or electric light bulbs. The church has been doing the same 4 core practices ever since. Because in the holy work of being church together, we are caught up in something larger than ourselves. We are learning to follow, as Anne Lamott put it, a brighter light than the glimmer of our own candle. We are part of something beautiful. Each July, I spend my 2-week study leave at the Chautauqua Institute in Western New York. It is for me a calm place where I prepare in heart, soul, and mind for another year of church life. I plan sermon series, I read, I think, I walk, I meditate, I pray. It is for me a holy pilgrimage. And each year, the very same question creeps into my soul. It's what the Jesuits call an examen. The question, where am I going and why? And do I want to keep going in that direction? After all, ministry is messy. Strangers that cost you at parties with their anger at the church, or even in you. The church is full of drama, plans go wrong. Ministry, be it by clergy, elders, deacons, or ministers all, can be pretty heavy lifting at times. But then I become quietly and deeply aware of just how good weightlifting can be. I become grateful for the feast God lays out for us in the Lord's Supper. The synergy that emerges from men and women who choose to pull together the same direction. Worship that elevates and challenges the soul. And after almost 30 years at this, so far each year in my heart of hearts, I am convinced that the church is still the hope of the world. Not the institution we call church, but the family of God gathered together to learn and love, to worship and pray, to seek and strive, to disagree, but not give up on each other, to love God and one another as best we can. And each year I reflect and pray, and I am still at it, promising God I will show up here as best I can. Perhaps you've met Sean and Carly Bailey since they began worshiping among us last fall. Their beautiful baby boy Turner was born in March, and we celebrated his arrival with a rose on our chancel. And little Turner has not missed a Sunday since. The Baileys had signed up for this new members class this spring, but we received this note from them last week. Sean wrote, Carly and I are extremely grateful for all the gifts given to us since we moved to Los Angeles. But the time has come for us to move to the next chapter of our lives. I have accepted a research position at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the position Carly and I have prayed for every day. We pray for continued guidance with this new chapter, as it too is an unknown. We also pray for the opportunity to find a church family that is at least 1% as great as Westwood Presbyterian Church. If we find that, I know we will be in good hands. Thank you. Well, that note brought a tear to my heart. It also made me deeply grateful for you, for this church, for this family with a huge and embracing heart, this place of grace, this community of love. The Bailey's note was a reminder that we are part of something beautiful. Consider this. A dear family moving across the country is hoping to find a spiritual family just like you. Our commitments to worship, fellowship, learning, and prayer taken seriously, they touch and change lives, even our own. In an article she wrote 3 years after her Traveling Mercies book, Anne Lamott continued her reflections now years later on why she still makes Sam go to church. Sam is 14 now and at least outwardly still hates church. So why do I make him go, she asks. I make him go because I still can. He has no job, no car, no income. He's basically a freeloader. He needs to stay in my good graces. I also make him go because I want him to. These are bewildering, drastic times we live in, and little spiritual guidance never killed anyone. Sam doesn't want to go to church, but by the same token, he doesn't want to floss or do homework or weed. He does not want to do any hard work ever. But I cannot give him what he wants without it injuring him. It is good to do uncomfortable things. It is weight training for life. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. They did it together, sometimes messy, not always easy, but always beautiful. Let us pray. God of mercy and grace, on this day as we recommit ourselves as stewards, as trustees of all that belongs to you. We are saying again this year, we are still at it, promising you we will show up here as best we can. In these bewildering, drastic times, we are grateful for the privilege of being part of something profound, something beautiful, something significant, something larger than ourselves. Pray in the name of the one whom we follow, Jesus the Christ. Amen.